Okay, back with another new Capenna mini video here, where I'm going to be talking about the gelling of flavor with card design, and why I think it matters, and kind of why Obnixilis the Adversary is a bit of a disappointment to me. So this kind of starts with a story. I was reading through the card image gallery for New Capenna for the first time when the full card list got revealed, and I was scrolling through the cards one by one, and I keep seeing these flavor text, these hints towards like the adversary, or these hints towards Ob Nixilis being around, and the artwork and stuff like that. And I am getting really excited for when I get to like the gold cards or where I assume the planeswalkers are. And I'm scrolling through, and I get to Ob Nixilis, and I was disappointed because when I think of someone like working behind the scenes, machinations to take over the plane, starting house wars, things like that, I was expecting like maybe the like I don't know, something big, splashy, something like terrifying. And instead you get like a 3-mana planeswalker that's like I don't know, its abilities are just kind of like making a devil token or making people lose life. Like I don't think the card's bad, but it just felt like it didn't really reflect the kind of big impression I had in my head. And it kind of gave me some thoughts on why it's important for your big splashy characters to kind of feel like the big splashy character or things like that. I was thinking specifically of the like stories behind the like family houses, and how when you play one of these cards, if you're a more casual player or you're a player that kind of enjoys the lore, or you're like newer to Magic, when you play your like family leader or the Ob Nixilis, the adversary, it's kind of nice to have that splashy effect, or something of that nature. Not like every card has to have it, but like you play your Zeatori and you're like, oh my gosh, this card is so sweet. It's a 6-mana 6/6 flying dragon that does all sorts of cool stuff. When you have your, let's get to another one of the main house leaders. Specifically, I was looking for the Cavaretti one because I think they did a pretty good job with that one. Rafine is an interesting example because Rafine is cheap, but Rafine plays into the idea that like it fits the theme so perfectly. Like when I was reading this card, I was like, okay, it starts as a 3-mana 1/4, but it can make itself more powerful by conniving a lot. And the conniving becomes more powerful if you attack with more creatures, because the bigger your network of information, the more powerful you're going to become. And Rafine has such a big network of creatures that they eventually have grown into this massive power creature. Even if they maybe started as a 1/4, they just grow over time, and that like makes sense because information is power, and the more information you have, the better you're going to be suited, and all of that stuff. And I was like, okay, that feels really cool. When I was like Obnixilis, as I said, I'll get back to him. I'll come back to you, Obnixilis. When you go to one of the other Praetors, like when you play like Lord Xander, I'm not sure his like card effect really fits with his lore perfectly. I've been reading some of the stories, and it doesn't really necessarily feel like him making your opponent discard cards or like mill them. Like I don't really know exactly what that is, but you certainly get the feeling when you play Lord Xander that you're like, yes, I just did something. My opponent is losing half of their stuff. My opponent is getting milled for half of their stuff. Like if they kill it, they're gonna lose half their stuff. It just feels powerful when you have your like 7-mana leader of the family. This guy's a really good example, the Jetmir, where it's like, okay, Jetmir, he's already kind of big, but he makes all of your creatures better. The more creatures you have, the better, because they're all in the party together, and just kind of crazy stuff like that. And I'm like, when I'm going through these house leaders, they kind of just feel like they make sense to me. Like this thing, it's a big flyer. It's got protection because the shield counters. You can like cast spells by paying a cost, because everything you do when you're making pacts comes at a little bit of a cost for your like person. You have to like give something up if you want to get something. That's kind of how the whole thing works. It just kind of makes sense. And it's kind of like it's like a good big splashy feeling. And then when you play your big Ob Nixilis, who's supposed to be like behind the scenes, I think those are all of the house leaders. Yeah. When you play your big Ob Nixilis, who's like behind the scenes, manipulating everyone, he's like taking advantage of all this stuff. And then you play him and you like +2 him, and your opponent loses 2 life. And you're just like, oh, that wasn't very like I don't know. I was expecting more when I read it. Honestly, I was like, sure, you make your copy, but I don't see how that has to do, like, it's Ob Nixilis, like 2 of Ob Nixilis. I don't think him duplicating himself has ever really been like a thing, really. Maybe that's later in the, like, maybe that's in the storyline somewhere, but like if you're reading through the cards, which most people aren't going to be reading the story online, and you're reading through the cards, there's nothing about Ob Nixilis like duplicating himself on the card like flavor texts. Or if it is, it's like so subtle that I didn't pick it up when I was reading through the cards, and I was reading all the flavor text, because the flavor text is a lot of fun. And when you play your Ob Nixilis and you're like, okay, this guy that's been behind the scenes, I've been seeing all this stuff on flavor text about him, and then he's just this guy, this like dinky little guy that like makes a 1/1. It's like kind of not what I wanted. I'm just a little bit disappointed. And I think it's kind of interesting. The casualty stuff makes sense from a perspective of Ob Nixilis like taking advantage of players. But I wish that it had been designed in a way that felt like it was consistent with kind of the themes or the like ideas of the set, where you play your Ob Nixilis and maybe his ultimate is like something really devastating for your opponent, versus like because he's like taking him out or something, instead of just like drawing cards. Like this design feels interesting, but not like really for this situation. Maybe if the casualty was this Ob Nixilis gets more loyalty, instead of making like a copy of him. Like I don't get the copy flavor at all, really. But it's just maybe it's like two forms of him, like the little one, the big one. Yeah, they're just a little bit disappointed by the design. And like I feel like they do their best. Obviously, I'm not trying to like be mean about their designs, but I do think it's an important thing, and I do think it's worth, like, it's interesting to talk about, because I think they nailed it with a lot of their designs in this set. I thought they nailed it with, like, pretty much almost all of the, like, House Lords feel really good, except maybe, like, Lord Xander, because Lord Xander doesn't... I feel like Lord Xander's, like, as a collector, should have had a tutor effect attached to him, because he, like, collects things, and he has, like, a lot of knowledge, and stuff like that, and it's not necessarily as thematic, but... Still, when you play him, you feel like, oh, I just played the head of the Maestros. This is cool. And I don't really get that feeling with the Ob Nixilis. So that was just kind of, I think it's important to have designs that make sense with the flavor of the set and what you're doing. And when you miss on something like the key villain of the set, it just feels a little bit bad to me. And I'm not sure, maybe when I actually play against it, I'll feel that way, like where it's like, oh man, they just played Ob Nixilis. But I certainly, I just remember when I was reading through the cards, I was like, oh, it's a 3-mana Planeswalker, which sure, maybe that's better for like constructed stuff, but I like it when the stuff kind of makes sense to me. Like you can make like a 3-mana Planeswalker and just make it like someone that isn't like the feature villain of the set, because if you put him up in a fight against some of the other folks, I mean, you made your opponent lose 2 life versus like all this other crazy stuff that you could have had on a like key marquee Planeswalker. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on Ob Nixilis the Adversary, the whole idea of designing a card to be flavorful. And I just want to close with a card that I find really funny from a design perspective, that really the flavor is everything with this card. It is the card Jackhammer from this set. And the reason this card is so funny is because it has the line "subtlety is overrated" on the card, and the card is just the most like basic equipment you could possibly design. Like I'm sure they must have like a card that's this exact card before. But I think that's really funny because like a Jackhammer is not a very subtle tool. The card itself is not complicated at all, and like it's kind of a funny joke even if the card is bad. And I just think that those sorts of designs are really appealing. Honestly, there's several designs in this set that are like so high quality, like even for commons that aren't the best, that I felt like I got really excited when I saw them. Like there's also a green one, this train, the Capenna Express, where it's like, oh, you can sack a treasure for it to become a creature, because yeah, you pay your board and you can get on the train. Like that made so much sense to me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's like such a cool design. Let's go. And those sorts of designs really make me happy. And so I just want to point those ones out because I like to be positive and not doom and gloom stuff. I was just I used the Ob Nixilis, which was kind of a design that I wasn't happy with, to talk about this topic, but they do nail a lot of these designs where it's like, yes, that design is very satisfying. And I think having a satisfying design makes the card more fun to play with, and things like that. So yeah, those are just my thoughts on that topic. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe for more content, comment below with your questions, thoughts, and feedback, and I'll talk to you next time. I was talking with Twitch chat about this concept after I finished recording the initial run, and I just thought of this great parallel that I wanted to draw for this video, and that is kind of the imagery of NicolaiBolas as a Planeswalker, and how if NicolaiBolas was a 3-mana Planeswalker with the abilities of that Ob, it would be kind of a disappointment and a letdown. Even if the design is good, even if it's like a masterful design, having a kind of small, dinky Planeswalker to represent NicolaiBolas not going to feel satisfying. When you just look at the history of the card, it's been printed many times. There's like so many versions of it, and all of them are these like game ending, like massive threat planeswalkers or cards. Like this is the very first one. It's like an 8 mana creature that's like massive and has like all of this effects on it. The last version they made was a 5 mana version, but it has like really unique and cool effects where it's like, man, it takes the abilities of all of their planeswalkers and it can kill planeswalkers, draw like cards, and then its ultimate like wins you the game. And like all of the ones in between are like, they really emphasize that. Even the like the creature one that flips into this like insane planeswalker, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I just kind of felt like with the Ob Nixilis, it missed on the game ending bomb status. Even if it is a cool design, it doesn't really fit the like design I was hoping for. And I think NicolaiBolas is a kind of a great example. That would be like, if there was a 3 mana NicolaiBolas that was like that design, it would be kind of disappointing, because you're like, kind of, when you think NicolaiBolas, you think game ending threat, and when you think Ob Nixilis taking over the plane, that's kind of what I was thinking. And yeah, that's just another point that I wanted to make. I'll add this into the video somewhere with my magical editing powers, but I just wanted to make that extra point.